This talk is a product of my politics, experience, and recent visit to the US-Mexico border. I had the privilege of making the visit to McAllen, Texas, with the Dream Lead Institute out of Trinity University, along with 25 other fellows flying in from all over the country. We arrived expecting a crisis at the border. After meeting local politicians, organizers, and community members, we quickly learned the border crisis does not exist. After hearing the constant rhetoric from politicians over the last several years, we expected seeing this, but we heard from the community over and over again, there is no border crisis. What it is a humanitarian crisis. As we stared at what is glorified as the cage of gold, many of us felt anger because this metal wall was the reason for detention and deportation. Sadness because many of us have not seen our families in years. We felt guilt and helplessness, but we were still grateful to be there together. I was mesmerized by this cage as I was trying to envision a world without borders. My mind was racing until I stopped and looked at how beautiful the park was. And I mention this because seeing the birds fly from one side to the other, seeing the Rio Grande River for the first time, seeing flowers and trees that I had never seen before, brought me back to the current situation in which I started evaluating the markers of reality. The reason we showed up expecting a crisis at the border was because of the language and imagery tied to criminalizing whole communities. The criminalization of a whole community is just the beginning of a humanitarian crisis. I'll be using two intersecting narratives, immigrants and formerly incarcerated people, to illustrate how US policies criminalize, exploit, dispose, and erase people from all over the country and the world. We're gonna start with language. When we hear things such as ex-cons, felons, drug dealers, lawbreakers, fugitives, we begin to identify people as a crime. These words and images create racialized fears tied to crime. Using language that strips people of humanity creates an environment that makes it easier to justify massive spending on prisons, detention centers, border enforcement, the military, and more. Imagery plays a huge role in criminalizing groups of people. When images like these portray asylum seekers, incarcerated folks, and immigrants, we start to internalize that imagery as reality. When we watch shows like Cops or videos of people getting shot to death, we start to normalize and desensitize ourselves for various reasons. When politicians run ads like this, their intention is to influence the masses. So what does all this do? It convinces us that others are dangerous. It is not the crisis at the border, but a symptom of the criminalization, exploitation, and disposal of our bodies. The language and images we use have repercussions. They create barriers for us to succeed. Barriers including the ability to vote, to leave the country, pursue higher education, attain a job. Think about it. What are the two questions every job application or going into a higher institution asks? Are you a US citizen? And have you ever been convicted of a crime? We are being subject to deserving less because the criminalization of our bodies supplies labor and money. So how is all of this happening? Let's talk a little bit about the public safety narrative. The public safety narrative has been used in various points in history to manipulate and control society. An example of this is Ronald Reagan's presidential address on the war on drugs. The image of Nancy and Ronald Reagan sitting in their living room, warning Americans about the dangers of crack, immediately followed by images of Black folks, created an even more unsafe and hostile environment for Black communities throughout America. Here's another example. This one's more recent. Trump's presidential address on the urgency of a border crisis also used this public safety narrative to convince people that increasing border enforcement was urgent as criminals made their way to America in caravans. Both of these addresses justify mass incarceration and mass detention, but they also tell us that your safety comes at the cost of somebody else. I want to talk about a different narrative. This one might resonate a little better. This one includes people like Obama, who supposedly championed the rights of the undocumented community, but under the guise of the Dreamer narrative, turned around and deported more immigrants than any other president in US history. Bill Clinton passed 2 laws that expanded the scope of deportable offenses and altered immigration. It gave rise to the legal structure that allows for mass incarceration and mass detention today. There's one more person I want to talk about, Alejandra. When you co-opt a movement such as Abolish ICE, you are exploiting the struggles with false promises for political gain. It discredits the hundreds of people who actively work towards ending detention every single day. It discredits the people on hunger strike, the families who have lost loved ones. The language and images that we use have consequences, and it is up to us to move past just having a conversation. So now what? We need to create access to resources for people to survive, things that include opportunities, access to water and food, access to education, and access to healthcare. In order for us to move forward, we need to listen to the people that are being most affected, the people that are coming, the people that are here. We need to stop passing policies that are criminalizing and dehumanizing our bodies. And we need, instead of relying on the political narratives, listen to the narratives of the people most affected. For instance, I co-created a podcast for this exact reason: to broadcast the narratives, ideas, and projects of the undocumented community itself. This allows us to write our own history. As I stood there observing the birds, the river, and the vegetation next to this cage, I started thinking of new opportunities, something that opened like an idea for something bigger. I was really contemplating what was next after this and what I was going to do about it. And really, I decided that we need to move past these narratives and look for a narrative that is not based on fear or policies of separation, but a narrative that is based on compassion and hope that stands up for humanity. This way, we can dream of something bigger. My name is Victoria Matey Mendoza. I'm the co-host of A Shot of Truth podcast, Dream Lead Institute Fellow, and thank you for coming to my TED Talk.